Hi, welcome to our first ever episode of Tonnau Tyfu. Some of you listening will be used to our Tonnau talks where we talk about psychology and our children and how we kind of support them develop and grow. Whereas this section that we're doing now is all about parents' direct questions to us. So we invite you all to send in your questions about your children so that we can have a discussion about it and hopefully answer some of your questions. So today you're with me, Dr. Karis Rees and Caitlin Davis, and we're going to be answering some of your questions. So Caitlin, can you tell us what's the first question we've had in from our parents?
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, before we start, for sending your questions in. We really appreciate it. So our first one says, Hi, Tonnau Tyfu. I'm really hoping you can help because I'm feeling quite worried. My partner and I have recently split up and now we live in different homes. We share our little boy, he's 2, and we've worked hard to make co-parenting go smoothly. Most of the time things are okay, but there's one part that's really upsetting me. Whenever it's time for me to hand him over to his dad, he gets so upset. He cries, clings to me, and says no over and over. It honestly breaks my heart to see him like that. I've tried everything I can think of, distracting him with toys, giving him a little treat, but it only works sometimes. What's confusing is that he really loves his dad and enjoys his time with him, so I don't understand why the handover is so hard. Is this normal for his age? Am I doing something wrong? I just want to make it easier for him and honestly for me too. Any advice would mean the world.
Oh, thank you for sending that question
Mm,
in. That sounds like
it's a really
such a
tough one.
difficult situation, especially when your little 2-year-old is getting so upset and it can really worry parents when this is going on because ultimately a 2-year-old has a very limited language
Mm,
base and if he's saying no 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 and you're trying your best to kind of reassure and distract, it does make you worry, but I'm really glad to hear that you're confident that he's having a lovely time with his dad, but there's just that handover
mm,
situation can be really distressing for them. It's a big thing for all our children to go through, and especially our little ones. And I think the key here is ultimately number one, how are you feeling, isn't it?
yeah,
Because I know when as parents, when we're kind of thinking that we're taking our child to somewhere that potentially they're going to become emotionally dysregulated. I know myself, I will already sort of feel a bit
yeah.
on edge. And ultimately, I'm sure your son's dad is probably prepared for
Mm,
potentially the tears, and which, again, is distressing for everyone. So, ultimately, the main thing I'd say is about checking in with yourself as well, because these situations are upsetting, and I think we underestimate how much our little ones can really understand and
mm,
preempt as well. They kind of feed off our emotions as much as we're trying to do our best by kind of, maybe being overly kind of joyful and, oh, look at this and distracting. I think sometimes that can put off the sort of the wrong vibe for our little ones, especially. Um, I think in terms of when you're going through this massive change, obviously, parents have separated.
mm,
That's a huge change, isn't it? It's hard for
yeah,
everyone. And I think it's important that, we look at the routines because
yeah.
ultimately there's been a massive change. And in order for everyone to kind of feel safe and secure and knowing, what's going on, routines are very, very important, especially for our little ones as well. And I think if that is something to ensure that if you can stick to a consistent
Mm,
routine, as we know with little ones, though, breaks in routines can be kind of a time where they need extra reassurance. So, for example, if your son is with you for, 4 days and then going to dad, it can be that break has been so long for them, even
yeah.
though for us, 4 days can fly by. For our little ones, that can be a really long period. So all of a sudden then going to dad's, can be somewhat unpreparedness for them. So I think it's really important that, we start surely kind of building up that routine so that they know that it's coming, and certainly don't underestimate as well how much they can understand of your language, so what you're saying, because our little 2-year-olds, I know they use the word no very well, but sometimes our 2-year-olds can have limited language use, whereas they can understand a lot more than what they actually express themselves. So I think there needs to be a lot of kind of preparation for these transitions, and for them to be assured that it is happening, but it's going to be done in a very planned and careful way. So it's about having those routines within that transition. So when I mean transition, so for example, if you're waking up on the day that he's going to dad's, it would be, today we're going to see dad's, and your son might be, absolutely fine with that and seem happy about that at that time. But I'm wondering whether or not the distress comes when it's at the point where he's at dad's house and he knows he's at dad's house, and that's when that kind of separation from yourself is actually, increased. So I think certainly preparing during the day and not holding off to kind of it land as a surprise. But also being mindful that, he might be fine knowing that he's going to dad's later, because a 2-year-old might find it very difficult to understand what later is or this afternoon means. So it's about maybe having kind of more a visual schedule of, we're going to go to grandma's this morning, and then we're going to have sandwiches, our lunch, and then we're going to go to dad's. So he knows that there's a small structure to the day, not too much information, because we don't want to overload him with too much information, but just to have those little pictures, maybe a picture of grandma, for example. Then we're going to eat lunch, and then we're going to go to dad's. And just to make sure that you reinforce that throughout the day. So after you've been to grandma's, you go, right, lunch now, then dad's. So that is always kind of reinforced with him.
I think it's finding those opportunities for familiarity, isn't it?
Exactly.
It sounds as if there's a lot of kind of novice being introduced to his life, in the sense of there's, a new relationship between mum and dad, there's new home potentially, if you're in different homes, there's a new space, there's a new routine. I think it's about finding a way in which we can have a common thread through all of that, So I wonder kind of, like you were talking, Carl, with our routine, I wonder, how similar or different you and, your ex's routines are with, your son, is he kind of going to a complete new world when he goes to a different home? And it might be helpful if you and your ex kind of have a similar routine or work on a routine you can uphold in both your houses. Then your son can find that familiarity. He goes to bed at 6, for example, in both households. He has the same lead up to bed.
Same routine, dinner, bath, and then bed.
Absolutely. So he can find that sense. So even if, I'm assuming here that, perhaps your husband is in the new home or, wherever, that even if he is in a new space, on both sides, he can still find that element of familiarity in that he knows how time is going to work, what's going to happen next, there's that predictability in it.
Yeah, because that's so important for our kids. Like anywhere and at any age, even our teenagers need that predictability and routine. And you're right, Caitlin, saying like, with blended families, as we know, if we can replicate the routines that go on in one household and another, that will help our children to be able to adapt better to the changes. And I think that's something that's really, really important to reflect on. And I think with our 2-year-olds as well, and you mentioned, are you doing the right thing? And that is such a worry for us as parents. It's like, am I making things worse? Should they have got used to this by now? Is this normal for their age? These are questions that we have throughout our child's life. No matter how old they are, we always question, are we doing the right thing? And is this normal for their age, with their behaviours? And I think what's the key here is that, your son is clearly trying to communicate to you that he is distressed, and what I would want to sort of kind of put forward here is that as much as distraction can be helpful and it can work, with a toy or an ice cream or whatever it may be, I think what's the most important thing here is that we're validating feelings, because when we use distraction, what we're kind of reinforcing in our children then is that their feelings and emotions aren't appropriate or aren't kind of recognized as right for this situation. And actually, what is likely is your son is feeling like overwhelmed or kind of unprepared, and maybe kind of feeling that he's going to miss you, which is all normal.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely normal. And I think this is where we need to kind of consider, like our emotion coaching strategies, which would be about, number one, naming the emotion, like, and saying what you see. It'd be like, do you know what? I can see that you're really upset. And I get that because you're gonna miss me, and you maybe, you're really enjoying the time that you're having with me right now. And it's about helping them to normalize that. That's normal and that's okay, because what we want children to do is to be able to feel like, yeah, I can express my emotions and I don't have to bottle them up, or they're not invalidated, because that can causes a lot of confusion for our kids. It's kind of, I've got this big feeling, but people are giving me toys and kind of trying to be like over kind of happy and around me to try and, maybe happiness is infectious. Well, actually, what that causes is a lot of confusion within our children, because that ultimately they're feeling, sadness, frustration, disappointment, whatever it may be. And actually, they're trying to be convinced to feel happiness when it's not right within the circumstances. And I think that comes from parents being really worried.
Yeah.
Because I've been there myself, when you think, oh, try and make everyone around you feel happy when someone's sad. We've been brought up in the society, as soon as someone starts crying, we say, don't cry, because we want them to be happy. But actually, crying is a sign that someone needs help, not, not someone to kind of overwrite that, and try and kind of force them to feel something else out of goodwill. I know that parents, we really struggle, don't we? Sometimes we never want to see our children distressed. So what we try to do is overcompensate for that by using distraction. And sometimes it can seem like it is, making things worse by saying to your child, I could see that you're really upset and I get that. I get why you're feeling upset, because we're worried that that is actually going to make things worse and actually make them more kind of sort of fearful of that separation. But actually what that does is drive that connection between you so that they feel more understood with this really difficult feeling. What we don't want our children is to feel alone in this feeling. And what we can't do is erase that feeling through distraction. The only way that we can help them with that big feeling, that difficult feeling, is to connect with them.
I think you picked up something really important there, is that sense of co-regulation, isn't it? A 2-year-old isn't going to be able to regulate their emotions. They haven't developed that skill yet, so they're gonna rely on you and your ex-partner to do a lot of the heavy lifting in that situation to help them to feel safe, and I can imagine this is really distressing for you both as well, but it's really important that you stay calm in this situation and that you're able to be a safe, calm space for your child to kind of co-regulate with, by having that kind of what Cara's was saying. Another thing that come to mind is because I've kind of, I've kind of seen these sort of situations before, and I've had kind of I've seen a similar situation in my kind of personal life. So I know this is definitely something that a lot of families kind of can find difficult, particularly in those early days of transitioning into kind of a blended or kind of separated family. Can be the thing of what, so I think we call it a transitional object. But basically that's just a fancy term for something that travels with your child to both homes. So it might be like a teddy or a particular toy that they love and they have a real strong connection to it. But that might be something that might kind of help them on that transition by, again, bringing back that idea of familiarity, predictability, safety. It's having something that
Consistency.
yeah, that comes from mum's house with the little boy to dad's house and then back from dad's house to mum's house again. So wherever that child is, they still have that object with them, reminds them of home. You can do things like, Mum, if you want to spray a bit of perfume on it, or if Dad, maybe a bit of perfume on the front, bit of aftershave on the back, so that both of you represented. But essentially, that child has a little partner on that little journey with them that reminds them of the people that they love, that help them feel safe.
One thing I would say is get more than one of those.
Yeah.
I remember years ago with my daughter losing that favorite teddy. It's try and get a couple, because that can help those panic moments when we may have lost them. But I think that's really important to have that object, as you say, transitional object, but actually what it is, it's something comforting that is connected to both households, isn't it? And it helps provide that kind of familiarity in both households, where they're like, this teddy or whatever object it might be. It might even be little blankets,
toy,
whatever it may be. It is something that comes with them, and I think
bridges the gap, doesn't it?
It does. And I think, in terms of, what we've discussed just today, those things of preparing your child, having that consistency across both households, it's consistent routines and boundaries and expectations and whatnot. That's so important. But having that like countdown of, okay, we're going to dad's now this afternoon, but first we've got to do this and this, so that they've got an understanding of time as well, and how soon it's coming. And then what you might need to do is, when you sort of arrive at the house, is about, doing that emotion coaching, doing that kind of, I can see that you might want to stay with me a bit longer, and I really want to stay with you longer too, but I'm really looking forward to seeing you on whenever that would be, tomorrow or the day after, and I know Dad has got lots of lovely things planned to do with you because he's missed you as well. So it kind of helps normalize emotions. So both mum is feeling emotion and dad's feeling different emotions. So it's about understanding that, we all feel these emotions at different times, and that sometimes, this is what we've got to kind of look forward to in a way, while still validating that it's okay to have these emotions.
Absolutely. And that can be a conversation and I would encourage your ex to be part of that conversation as well, for both of you to get on your son's level and, have that little kind of chat with him. And again, showing that there's a connection in that, isn't it? And that might help to kind of alleviate some of the separateness that your son kind of feels when he's kind of, if you're both there co-regulating with him, again, it's gonna kind of trigger those feelings of safety and connection and security, which are all going to be helpful in the long run, isn't it, in terms of that transition.
Because what you might find as well is that, in order to try and help with that regulation. So, it sounds like to me that, this may have been going on for a little while now, and that you're really worried about that it hasn't improved, because we do kind of expect this anyway. And what you could do is, like, before going in the house, maybe singing some songs together, like nursery rhymes, because ultimately that helps, with the coping with that emotion, whether that be, doing some drawing or colouring or something like that. There's an activity that kind of helps regulate them. And especially like listening to their favourite music, whether that be the Disney classics or whatever. But that can just help with that kind of alleviating some of that, big emotion that they're feeling, and co-regulating with them. So you're doing it together. It's not that you're trying to pretend like you're super happy. and trying to force them to kind of meet you at that happiness. It's actually you as the parent coming down to their level in that kind of place of where they may be feeling sad or, quiet, whatever, and go, we're going to do this together. I can see that you're feeling a bit sad, and that's okay, because I'm going to miss you as well. Let's do this together. How about you ring the doorbell? Or how about we hide and we jump out at dad and give him a big fright? Something silly like that, or you could buy dad something or go and pick dad flowers or something, and your son can give those to dad when he buys them. Dad can be really overwhelmed that he's had these, little bunch of, daisies or whatever it may be. Something just to be as a way of connecting with the dad then, because ultimately what you're finding is that your little son is having to kind of disconnect from you, and actually we need to then encourage that connection then with dad, so it be something at the doorstep where dad is either right, or whether it's the kind of playfulness in that respect, or it's the giving the little bunch of flowers that you might have picked in the park, or even a special pebble you might have picked up, and then dad can be really over the moon to see that as well, and that just helps keep those that co-regulation going. Sometimes as well, I think drop-offs, if they overgo the time, I think sometimes that can be a bit tricky. And I know when it's drop-offs, it is sad as a parent to be dropping your child off. You are going to miss them. You've enjoyed your time with them, and it can be difficult to separate as well. And I think sometimes it's helpful to have that goodbye routine. So whether it's the the 5-second squeeze and a little connection, kisses all over, whatever it may be, it's the same kind of goodbye routine as it is that the dad then has something fun and exciting to do within the house. So it's like it's helping to maintain that connection, and also supporting the disconnection as well. And that can be something that you can kind of put in place so that your son then kind of knows that goodbye routine. Because I think that's really important as well then. And then often I know once they're in, they're fine. But I think if it gets to the point where and you will have this, where you may try and put in all these strategies, and actually your son may still be quite distressed, I think it's important to not just leave in a way like as we do as parents. It's like, oh, okay then, bye, and like off you go waving, even though they're distressed, and like you're trying to force yourself to ignore the crying. I think it's important to, as you leave, to recognize how upset they are and be like, oh, I could see you're so upset, because what we don't want is our children to feel dismissed in their feelings. So as much as distraction we try to use, dismissing feelings again can be quite tricky as well. And I know it's all in a good intention that we do this, that we try and kind of help kind of with that separation. I think it's important for us to still reflect that they are feeling these big emotions, and it's not to kind of rush off in that way. And I know it can be tricky, but it's to if you can bring them down. So if he is upset, just bring him down a few steps before leaving, rather than leave when, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but if parents are listening, try not to leave when they're so distressed, because I know a lot of people think, oh, just go, they'll be fine when you've left. I know that we're still feeling it ourselves, and I think if we can help our child to just come down, even if it's just to the that kind of like crying, rather than the screaming crying, you've co-regulated. And it's important to recognize that actually you have helped there in that situation. Ultimately, then they're not going to be elated to see you go. Sometimes they will, we'll get to that point, but we do need to recognize that, it's okay to be sad, and that's okay. But also, if they are distressed, just help them come down a few steps um, before you go, because I think that's really important.
And it's important there as well that you don't kind of come back, kind of when, you've kind of, and we've all been there, kind of once you've got them to a point where they're co-regulated and they've kind of gone in or whatever, they've been left with dad. It's really important. And again, I'm not saying that you are doing this, but this is for general kind of, parents listening in, don't go back.
No.
If, you've forgotten a pair of their shoes in the car, you can text your ex and end up going back later in the night when they're asleep or something, whilst they're awake. And they have the opportunity to see you. You cannot go back, because that's just going to start the transition all over again.
That's really confusing as well. I get it that, gosh, when you're packing a bag, you can forget some of the most important things sometimes, and that's normal. But maybe it's about, okay, I'll just drop them off in the front garden, because that can, again, like you say, trigger them again.
Be very jarring. And again, and it's not just them, it's you pair as well, is you're gonna, you've had that sense of kind of, you've managed to kind of cope with your own feelings, cope with your child's feelings, and then it's just going to start you all off again. And it's, kind of, and you're going to feel distressed, because you're just popping in, you're going to be far less likely to have the time to go through the process all over again. And like Hard just said, we don't want to leave them in that high distress state. So, for kind of the purposes of that transition, just leave it, kind of don't start it back up all over again, because it's just going to be more distressing for you all. And likelihood is, if the child's distressed again, it's going to take them far longer to come back down.
And also, in terms of, coming back as well, sometimes our kids get very upset when you go to like pick them up. And I remember this with my own, child. I'd when she was 2, I would drop her off to nursery, and it was hard because she'd be crying so much. I'd be leaving thinking I was the worst parent in the world, and it'd sit with me for the entire day, the parent guilt, of I just abandoned my child, whatnot. And then I'd go and pick her up, and she'd be sobbing, and I'd be thinking, oh my gosh, my poor child. And I spoke to the staff, because they could obviously see that I was also very, upset by it, because it is upsetting. And I remember them saying to me, right, drop her off and go and sit in the office for 2 minutes and go and peek through the window. And I guarantee you, every single time I'd peek through the window and she'd be absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. And then when I'd come and pick her up, the staff would tell me to go and have a little sneak look at her before I'd go into the room, and I'd be watching it. She'd be playing quite happily. But as soon as I came through the door, the tears would just come, and she'd come running to me like we'd been separated for years, And sometimes it's just the emotions of a 2-year-old are so big. And also, like you said at the beginning, Caitlin, they don't know how to cope with these big feelings.
And it's not personal as well. I think something you highlighted was really lovely there, Couch. I think for you and, the person who wrote it, and for you and your ex, it's really important to note that it often isn't personal. It can just be the changing of the space, the changing of, perhaps they've done a particularly nice activity with you and they're, sad that they're not doing that anymore. It does, it doesn't necessarily, I know you noted in there that you find it really confusing, because like you said, your boy, he loves his dad. He loves spending time with his dad. So a lot of the time, when we have these big emotional outbursts, particularly from our toddlers, our 2-year-old, a lot of the time it isn't personal. They just have a lot of big feelings. They don't really quite understand the world yet. They don't really quite understand what to do with those feelings. And so the only way they can communicate those feelings is by having a wobbly moment. And I think that's what we're seeing here. It's not so much about you or your ex or anything. It's just there's a little change in his life. There's a little transition that he's not quite sure about. A huge transition for him. And that's what's causing that, emotion, as opposed to it being anybody's fault or anything anyone has done. As you said, as you asked, it is normal for his age.
Yeah.
And, you're not doing anything wrong. But I hope that some of the strategies we've talked about today will just alleviate some of that distress for both of you in that situation, and might just make that transition a little bit smoother. And what's really good news is to you and to other parents listening is that these little like strategies and hacks we've given you today, you can use that for any transition.
Oh, for any age as
Yeah,
well.
for any age. So, at 2, we got school coming up.
Yeah.
So, or maybe go into a setting, a preschool or something like that. So you can use these strategies in a range of situations where there's that transition, where there might be that wobbly moment.
And just as a final note, just as something to be mindful of, it wasn't mentioned in the question, but think about, the activities, like Caitlin mentioned about doing a fun activity with you at home. Be mindful about the timings as well, because if you're dropping your son off, which would be at bedtime, in a way, he's coming to his dad, and actually there isn't time to do anything fun. So actually what you're dropping him off to then is that bedtime routine, which just be mindful, maybe be worth, factoring in, if possible, sometime where dad can be able to kind of continuing on the fun things that you've been doing, so that actually the transition to dad isn't just straight to bed, and then it factors in that opportunity for some play and some fun and that connection with dad as well.
It's really important.
Yeah, because I know sometimes we have to do changeovers at, like, after work or whatnot. So thank you for sending that question in, because it's so relevant to all of us, really. We've all connected with that, haven't we? And, but it's also really upsetting as well. And I can imagine that it's been tough, and it's tough for everyone, because nobody likes to see their child upset and distressed. And hopefully you and your son's dad can kind of come together now and think of slight changes you can make. And please write in again, if it's, we would love an update if it's worked. If it hasn't, we want to try and help with this. So thank you, and all the best with that one.
Thank you so much. So we've got another question, just another one before we kind of finish for today. So I'll read this one out. So, hi, Tonnau Tyfu. I'm really struggling with this and could use some advice. I have a 12-year-old son who is completely glued to his smartphone. It feels like every spare minute he's scrolling, watching videos or playing games. I've tried setting limits, taking the phone away for a while, even suggesting fun things we can do together, but nothing seems to stick. Honestly, it's frustrating because I just want him to do other things, spend time with his friends or family, or even just have a break from screens in general. I'm worried about how much time he spends on it and what this may be doing to him. Is there a way to get him to put the phone down without it turning into a huge battle every day? Oh, I think this is a real topical one, this is, isn't it? I think this is, thank you so much for writing in, because I think you're definitely not alone in this one.
No. Wow. So we've got a 12-year-old who is, for want of a better word, sounds like completely addicted to his phone.
So they just discovered social media, and it's going to take over his life a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did a whole Tonnau Talks on this, so please
tap in screen time.
Please go and check that out. But yes, in terms of this one, what we know is that devices, social media, they're so highly addictive.
They're designed to be.
They're designed to be, and especially more so for a 12-year-old's brain, because what they're doing at that current time is that they're developing into a brain that is constantly seeking these little hits, these little positive reinforcements. And actually their attention and concentration isn't as well developed. So in fact, these short, sharp videos that they're watching, or social media, whatever it may be, or these little games that they're playing, are giving them quite a lot of positive reinforcement. Okay, these little dopamine hits, as we call them. And that's why, sadly, they are extremely addictive, especially for this age group. So your son is not abnormal in any way. That I can imagine a lot of parents listening now are nodding along with this, that they're finding this at home, even with the older children as teenagers as well, because it becomes more reinforced. Um, and I'm hearing your kind of frustration here that you've tried to put in measures in place, taking away his phone, and it just hasn't worked. And it's, sounds like in all good kind of parenting kind of need that you want him to be hanging out with his friends and doing more things with the family, which obviously is what we'd all want. However, this tiny little device has got him quite hooked. And what I would be wondering here is, sadly, time flies when they're on this phone, on these devices, and like I said, it gives them that kind of that hit that their brain is looking for. Okay, so it's feeding a need in a way, and what we need to do instead of taking that away, we need to put something else in place as well. Sadly, it's very difficult to replace the effect that device is having to that extent. These devices and social media, they've been created very cleverly to keep us connected, especially the teenage brain. So I think what's important here is your son being 12 years old is clearly of his own mind and needs to kind of want to have more autonomy. So that's more control over his life and kind of more kind of say in what he does, and getting to that age where wanting to push boundaries, wanting to take more risks, and that's normal for our teenage brain. But what we need to do here is engage him in the decision making. Now, some of us might be thinking, oh gosh, we don't want to relinquish all control to our children, and that's not what I'm saying here. But it's about helping them to feel part of the solution rather than having boundaries enforced upon them, because ultimately we're just going to get pushback from that. What we can do is make them more aware of the risks of social media, and obviously that is so important to make sure that all our young people are fully aware of the risks, and we are putting measures in place to protect them, because this is my little health warning for devices before we get stuck in, is that sadly these devices are being used as a way to sort of exploit children and young people. So I think it's really important that you make sure that your children are fully aware of the risks, and also you are as well, because I as much as I know so much about social media, I never know as much as the kids, because my goodness, I'm shocked sometimes about the different ways in which children are targeted online. I'm learning every single day, really, about the risks and the different ways that predators online are targeting children, whether that's to exploit them sexually or financially as well. So it's really important that we as adults are really aware of those risks, and not to kind of put the fear of God into everyone. But, I think it's important that if we're allowing our children to access these devices, that we are informed as much as possible. So with that, I think then it's important that we have an understanding that we are going to implement changes within the family household as a group, because what I think sometimes the reasons our teenagers push back so much is because they feel like these things are being done to them, that we as adults are, the fun police. We're here to ruin their lives and restrict them and put boundaries on them. But actually, what we want them to do is to feel part of the family, and that we're doing this as a, whole family. We're going to improve our kind of activities offline, okay, and our engagement offline. So it would be in a ways that you'd want to go, right, okay, this is the reason why I want to do this. Okay, these are the reasons why I want to restrict our use as a family with our devices. Okay, you need to put that forward to our children because often, especially our teenagers, they don't see the point in our boundaries. Okay, and sometimes because we don't explain it, we just put these boundaries in place and actually they don't see the point in it. But if we put the point across as in this is what we want and this is what we hope to achieve, they can see then what the why, okay, and ask them, what do you think we can do about it? And it's not about what do you think I can do about putting these measures in place for you. It's about help me to make positive changes for us as a whole. Yeah. And it's about getting them involved in exploring the solutions. Yeah. And then putting those boundaries in place. What you also would be helpful to do is explore with them about, what can we do otherwise? What do you want more of? Instead of these devices, what would you like more of? Maybe that's actually they'd want to go and, play football with their friends after school, but none of their friends are actually, initiating that.
Yeah, I think that's
Because they're all on
yeah.
devices as well,
It's a common thing we see, is it?
Yeah.
Children always want to play. Children
Yeah.
always have that innate drive to play. But in this new world where there is this kind of, this technology where, they have everything at their fingertips, they often forget to instigate that kind of basic connective play where
Yeah.
they go out and they kick a ball around and they
Yeah.
have a bit of a chat with their
Yeah.
mates and stuff like that. And I know that they talk on video games stuff like that on the headset, but sometimes it's not quite the same, is it, as when you see your friend in real life and they don't quite appreciate that. So it's quite a nice conversation to have around actually developing their social skills to be able to
Yeah.
reach out and say, actually, I'd really like it if we went to the park for an hour after school or we went and
Yeah.
played a bit of football.
Yeah.
I was thinking when you were talking about like those conversations about like, solutions and positive changes, one real nice way to instigate that conversation. I don't know if anyone's ever checked, you can on your phone, the amount of time you spend on social
Yes,
media.
I know.
I think that's a really helpful way to insert conversation
It's an
because
eye opener,
yeah,
isn't it?
absolutely. Because you do get, like you said, you get an element of time blindness when you're on
Yeah.
social media.
Yeah.
You kind of in that. It's almost like flow state, but
Mhm.
I don't like using that term because usually flow state we use with positive things
Yeah.
and we lose track of
Yeah.
time. But with social media, we do have that element where we're not quite sure how long we've been on it. And a real nice way to kind of bring that quite brutally back down to reality is to actually see how many hours we've. I know I've done it myself. I hold my hands up.
Yeah.
I've checked that and been really, really shocked and have to put in positive changes myself.
Yeah.
Because even as adults, we get sucked into the world of technology and social media. I think that would be a really nice way to have that conversation around actually how much time he's using. Does he think that's a good thing? Could that time be used better elsewhere?
Yeah.
And please be vulnerable in that conversation as well and show him your time
Yeah.
that you've spent on social media because you never know. You might need to make some positive changes as well. And like
Absolutely.
it feels like Carson, it feels more collaborative then. It feels more like you're on a mission together, as opposed to, you're being a parent and you're telling them what to do. And another thing teenagers don't particularly respond well to is if they feel like maybe you're being hypocritical.
Yes.
If you're starting a conversation around coming off their smartphone, but they can see you're on your smartphone a lot, they're going to become even more resistant to that conversation because they feel like you're putting something unfairly on them that you're not willing to do to yourself as well.
In fact, I had quite a shock. Well, not a shock. It was like a reality check when in my household we did this. We didn't put a restriction on times, but it was area within the house. So in the kitchen where we all kind of spent a lot of time as a family together. I was noticing everyone was on their phones in the kitchen, not talking to each other. So I was like, right, okay, let's think about what we can do here. And we agreed as a family that in the kitchen, we weren't allowed to use devices for social media. So, for example, if we needed to like Google a recipe or whatever, or check weather, whatever it was to do, that's fine. But actually, if we were zoning out on social media, then we'd get a mark against us if we were caught. And I got caught the most breaking that rule, which I was really shocked and actually really disappointed, because actually what I was finding that I was missing out on conversations. So when the kids were all being fantastic and I wasn't, um, it showed me that the amount that I was missing out on, and in fact, it made me very aware that actually I'm just as bad in some respects. So as much as I was noticing it with the kids, actually I was also doing it myself, and I think that's really important to kind of put your hands up. The kids thought it was hilarious that it was actually me, I was the worst. That it is something to kind of to be aware of, but also it's okay as well, because as we said at the beginning, they are designed to be addictive. And we are not aware when we're zoning out. Often when our eyes are so focused on what's on that little screen so close to our face, our hearing switches off so much. The ability to kind of have that peripheral hearing and vision is so focused on that little device. We're finding that more and more children have problems with their long vision as well. Can't see the board in class because they're so used to their eyes just focusing so closely on their devices, which is affecting our eyes. So
That's the thing with the brain, isn't it? Use it or lose it.
yeah, especially as a teenager, that's what the brain is doing, as we know with pruning. If you're not using certain skills, it'll get rid of it. So yeah, I think this is such a relevant topic, and it will always be. Sadly, we've got these little devices that are so helpful, but they can be very harmful as well. And it's about recognizing that as well. I think thinking about, ensuring that your son is, part of the solution, because again, he'll be more likely to, follow those boundaries if he's part of developing them, rather than it being imposed on him. Like you say, Kate, in a hypocritical way, like I'm telling you, you need to change. But actually, no, this is for everyone. I'm going to be part of it as well. And, it's about making other opportunities, because if we just say, oh, would you like to, take the dog for a walk? No, actually they want to stay playing on their devices. Whereas if it's like, no, every night we've got to take the dog for a walk for an hour. When should we do it tonight? You want to game late, you want to game with your mates, okay, tonight. What time are they all online? And we will work the dog walk around that. So they're still getting their time with their mates gaming, or on their device, whatever that may be. But you are ensuring that there are other things that you're putting in place. So it might be, the after school football with the mates. You help and enable your child to be able to, initiate that. So set that up. And then obviously it's about having those boundaries about how much time you're spending, and then making sure that there are other things in place to fill that time, because it's too easy to put your hand in your pocket, bring out that device to fill the quiet spaces.
Absolutely.
Actually, what we need to do is fill it with other things.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, Kat, having those conversations around, why it's not healthy to be glued to your phone and stuff like that, and what can potentially be harmful on the internet. Knowledge is power at the end of the day. This is new and fun, and all his mates are doing it. So your son's not gonna, it's not gonna be occur to him that this might be a harmful thing. So have that conversation, like I said, have that, kind of reasoning behind actually, this is why we're looking to make a change. And it's all going to be helpful for his problem solving skills going forward anyway. So, but thank you so much again for sending that question in. Like I said, I think this is so topical, there's a reason why we did a whole individual talk on it, because I think it's something we're all
Yeah.
facing at the moment.
Absolutely.
Definitely check out if this is something that you're finding a difficulty with. Definitely check out tackling screen time as a talk, because we go into things in more depth there that we haven't quite got a chance to cover today. But yeah, that brings us to the end of our first Tonnau Tyfu.
Yeah.
A huge thank you for everyone who's listening, or everyone who's written in. We really, really appreciate your support and your engagement with us. It means so much. If you enjoyed this series, please like and subscribe. Let us know so we can continue providing this service to you guys. And if you have any questions that you want to kind of write in and ask us, then please, scan the QR code on the screen. We've got the QR code on the right is for Tonnau Tyfu. So please, kind of scan that if you've got a question. And on the left is a QR code that should take you to our previous talks if you wanted to check out tackling screen time or any of the other ones that we'll be doing. We're looking to make Tonnau Tyfu a regular stay on.
We just need your questions.
Yeah,
please send them in.
Yeah, please keep an eye out for any of our kind of following ones. And like I said, if you've got a question, chuck it in and we'll see if we can be of any help.
Yeah, so if you are listening on our other platforms such as Spotify or Amazon Music, the link to send in a question will be in the episode description.
Yeah, because we can't show the QR code on the screen. So yeah, just have a look in the description and kind of follow the link.
Okay, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to answering your questions next time. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr.